Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are the football writer and broadcaster Henry Winter and Carl Anker of The Athletic. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages as they reach us after a busy night of football. Telegraph has Leandro Trossard's image dominating there. His goal proved the winner in the North London derby. The Telegraph's headline, with a real big noise around here. Trossard on the back of the Times as well, which leads on their story from reporter Martin Ziegler on Chelsea, who are in talks with the Premier League over their hopes to pay a fine rather than suffer a points deduction over potentially incomplete financial reporting under the club's previous ownership. Guardian goes with this, firing back. Trossard clinches derby and keeps title bid alive, whilst they also carry the line from Ruben Amorim. Amorim telling his side to match Maguire's, quote, leader spirit. OK, let's start then with the Telegraph headline with a big noise around here. Trossard silences Spurs and Lewis Skelly joins in too. Carl, how convinced were you by Arsenal tonight?
It was a very comprehensive performance, a very strong opening 20 minutes, and perhaps Arsenal tied a little bit after the hour mark, but this is the North London derby. It's always a game with thrills and spills. I haven't done too many derbies in my shorter career than Mr. Winter, but I'm sure he'll give you evidence of how the North London derby has a unique attacking element to it that you don't always find in other big games across England and indeed on the continent.
Yeah, it's a unique fixture, Henry, isn't it? The Times back page has the headline, Trossard wins, eases pressure on Arteta. Was he under pressure, Henry, coming in? What's your read on Arteta's position?
I mean, all elite managers are under pressure, the pressure they put on themselves. I mean, I think the main pressure at Arsenal is that they need a number 9, but that's been a debate that's been running for sort of 2-3 years. But no, you could see from the opening whistle just how intense the urgency of Arsenal. Declan Wright was outstanding in midfield, box to box, absolutely outstanding. Miles Lewis-Skelly, only 18, was terrific at left back, stepping into midfield, inverting in the sort of the Pep modern manner, and completely unfazed by a North London derby. Spurs were, I mean, they got going for a while, but the fact that their two real leaders, their best two players on the pitch, were both teenagers, Archie Gray at the back and Lucas Bergvall in midfield. But I mean, it was interesting that the Telegraph headline that you showed earlier was, all about, we're Trossard effectively saying we're we're the real big noise around here. But really, they want to be heard up at Anfield. And OK, so they won. But, without Saka, with Havertz not quite clicking up front, without a number 9, Arsenal sort of lacked the firepower that Liverpool, with Diogo Jota back and obviously with Mo Salah, have. So, yeah, I think Arteta possibly a little bit under pressure. Arsenal fans, we're impatient. This is a season pretty much at the top without Manchester City. Liverpool obviously been fantastic with Arne Slot, but this was the season that Arsenal really hoped that their development under Arteta would click on. But tonight showed they're very much in the title race, and obviously with Nottingham Forest as well.
Let's talk title race, Carl. With it, we'll go to the back page of the Mirror. We're here to stay with Leandro Trossard pointing to his ears for people listening on the podcast. Derby delight for Arsenal as they fight back to beat Spurs and keep Kop in their sights. 4 points off Liverpool, having played a game more. Do they feel like proper title challengers this season, Carl, from what we're seeing?
Title contenders, for sure. Whether or not they can make up that distance at this point in time, the squad it's been decimated by injury, missing Ben White. They've had a prolonged spell missing Saka. Odegaard was out for several months as well. So it does leave them quite short on firepower. I was at the FA Cup game on Sunday where Kai Havertz unfortunately spurned a number of chances for Arsenal fans there. And Henry is correct. There was murmurs of discontent at the Emirates Stadium. This is a team that the longer they go without winning the big trophies, the pressure increases on Mikel Arteta as to, is he the correct person to get them across the finish line? And in a season where Manchester City haven't quite been at their standard, I suppose that increases more pressure. I suppose there's a degree of Arsenal fans going, shouldn't this be our turn rather than the return of Liverpool to the ascendancy? So it's a difficult point in time, but if Arsenal can remain in the hunt between now and the end of the season, who knows?
It feels very open, doesn't it? Even with Liverpool drawing a couple of games. Let's go to the eye, Henry. Tongue lashing. Trossard again features. The headline: Trossard decides North London derby. It's all about Arsenal, isn't it, Henry? Despite the cavalry being called on at half-time by Ange Postecoglou, Tottenham 13th in the table. What's left for Spurs? Is it just the Carabao Cup?
Well, they'll want that, and they'll want to restore some pride. They want to restore some players. I mean, they've been struggling, obviously, defensively. Archie Gray playing left centre-back. He's an outstanding prospect in midfield. So they've been playing players out of position. But you mentioned Trossard there, and if you go inside in the Telegraph, there's a piece by the former referee, Keith Hackett, on the frustration that Spurs will legitimately feel that Trossard actually, it was a goal kick rather than a corner, which led to Arsenal's first goal. Obviously, VAR considers it a different phase of play, so VAR can't intervene. But Keith Hackett makes the very sort of pertinent point, and the very realistic point, that why didn't the VAR actually have a sort of whisper in Hooper, the referee's ear, and actually say, by the way, that's a goal kick, not a corner. Save yourself some embarrassment, and probably a fairly lively press conference from Ange Postecoglou.
Well, absolutely, Carl. It's a good point, isn't it? That piece by Hooper or the piece around Hooper in the Telegraph. Why don't they rethink the laws? Is that a fair one as well? Because it definitely came off Trossard, didn't it? It was a goal kick.
It very much did come off Trossard. It very much was a goal kick. I think this is, once again, the difficulty of implementing VAR, thing that was supposed to bring subjectivity to the game. Sorry, that was supposed to bring greater objectivity into game, onto a game and a rule book that very much demands subjectivity. There are very often times where the issue is not VAR itself, but essentially whether or not you're willing to accept some degree of mistake or interpretation. So unfortunately, you've got this big mess here. And unfortunately for Tottenham Hotspur, I'm sure Ange Postecoglou will have spent multiple training sessions this week warning his players not to allow too many set pieces for Arsenal. And in the end, they've conceded through one that they actually didn't give away.
Spurs argue the Tross, fury at corner call, the headline there. Let's talk a little bit about Newcastle, Henry, because I think we should give them some credit tonight, shouldn't we? 9 straight wins. We've got a piece in the Telegraph by Luke Edwards, Northern football writer for the paper at St James's Park. Unstoppable Isak breaks Shearer record. We'll get on to how good Newcastle are, but is Isak possibly one of the star strikers of the Premier League era?
Of the Premier League era, I mean,
out.
Certainly at the moment, you can't sort of go back to Thierry Henry or Alan Shearer and compare him with that. He's got to do it season after season. Manchester United will throw a few players in there as well. Wayne Rooney as well. Isak's not at that level, but in terms of the consistency of his finishing, I mean, as you say, he's broken Shearer's record. I think did Joe Willock share it as well. So look, huge celebrations. He's a fantastic player. You need to keep him fit because we've seen, he can sort of disappear for a month or two here and there when he's not completely fit. But what a player. And look, Eddie Howe's done a fantastic job. And we talk about the pressure on managers. Eddie Howe, about sort of 3 weeks ago, he was being questioned, and they go on a fantastic run like this. We do get a little bit twitchy, whether it's a subtle thing, whether it's a media thing, whether it's a fans thing, and obviously social media forums accelerate every view. But you can't judge a manager necessarily game by game. You have to give them time. And Eddie Howe's absolutely deserved time because of his work at Bournemouth, because of the impact that he's had on Newcastle United. Probably wanted to spend a little bit more, strengthen maybe in certain areas. Right wing, I think, was an issue for a while. Maybe another centre half. But he's done a brilliant job with even with injuries, even with issues in goal. It's been outstanding. But Isak, coming back to Isak, what a player he has been. And I would say he's probably the best striker in the world on form at the moment. For him to be considered a Premier League great, he's got to do it for a few seasons.
Yeah, fair enough. I just wonder what Newcastle can achieve this season. We'll talk about the broader Champions League race in a second, Carl, but they sit 4th now. Chelsea out of the top 4 for the first time since October. 38 points, 9 off Liverpool and 5 off Arsenal. What can they achieve this season, given the form lines at the moment, Carl?
It's certainly a Champions League place is within their grasp. It's looking likely that 5th place will be enough to qualify for the Champions League this season, given the way the new league phase format is seeing a number of English teams do well in the current competition. I think one reason for Newcastle's fantastic form right now, not simply Isaac's phenomenal form, and he's one of a handful of strikers right now who are 6 foot plus, but they're able to dribble and use skill moves, much like a 5'7" person. It's a delight to watch. But I also say Sandro Tonali has begun to settle in. He's fantastic when Newcastle are out of possession. And to touch on Henry's point about Eddie Howe, you consider that during Eddie Howe's time at Bournemouth, a lot of the criticism was about Bournemouth being leaky when defending, and they weren't particularly great out of possession. Now that's become Eddie Howe's strength. I know more than one person who does the Totally Football podcast describes Newcastle as Atletico Tyneside, and there's a sprinkling of the Simeone in there, and I think. In an era of the Premier League, I think this modern era of the Premier League, post-COVID, post-lockdown, however you want to describe it, where physicality and your out of possession approach is even more important. Newcastle, particularly with their current configuration, fixtures, however you want to call it, are well placed to make a real big push for the top 4, top 5 places.
Absolutely. I like that likening to Atletico Madrid are having a fantastic time at the moment. Everton always physical, Henry, but perhaps lacking a striker. That's the issue. Chris Bascom writing in the Telegraph for them. Moyes left praying there are 3 worse teams in the league than Everton. Also online, we've got a story here. David Moyes returned to Goodison Park. Can't save Toffees from another loss after Watkins' strike. Tough start rather than tough start. Sobering night for Moyes, Henry, or do you think he'd have realised what he was up against?
He would have realised what he was up against because he would have looked at the striking options. Dominic Calvert-Lewin started, didn't score. Beto came on, didn't score. And now Broja, I think, is out for a couple of months, Moyes was saying in his press conference tonight. So that's been an issue. Recruitment's been a problem for Everton Football Club, arguably for a decade. So, look, Moyes will come in and he'll settle him down. He'll organise them. But he desperately needs a striker. He desperately needs a clinical finisher because they've got some good players in that Everton team. You know, you look at Jordan Pickford, Branthwaite, Unjai's been playing well, McNeil when he's fit as well. So, look, they've got some good players. They just need a finisher.
You certainly do, Carl. On that note, we've got Tottenham up next, haven't they? It's a difficult game for both teams, I suppose, at the weekend. But what chance of Everton finding some money and finding a striker? What's your assessment of their transfer options?
This one's a little harder to pass given the recent takeover, and Everton have always been an interesting buyer and seller of players. I think the squad composition is quite unusual in that, yes, there is some quality in there, but they don't necessarily have multiple players who can break down a defence and go past the player. So on more than one occasion, I've seen Sean Dyche's Everton play with Michael Keane as an emergency striker. They play sometimes blunt force trauma football, which, okay, that can maybe get you a couple draws rather than defeats, but it can be hard to generate points here. You do mention Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He hasn't scored in, I believe, 16 Premier League games right now, and that's a very difficult spell for him. You consider how good he was looking under Carlo Ancelotti and how he's currently having problems. It's difficult for Everton, and I suppose they would like to buy a striker, much like several clubs in the Premier League would like to buy a striker. But unfortunately, strikers come at a premium, and there's not that many who are readily available, especially in a January transfer window.
Yeah, big challenge finding a striker. Everton are, in the meantime, trying to find some goals. Carl, Henry, thank you very much for now. We will take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Times. Chelsea in talks to avoid a points penalty. Welcome back. You are watching Back Pages tonight, and it's welcome back to football writer and broadcaster Henry Winter and Carl Anker of The Athletic. Henry, come to you. Talk about Leicester, Crystal Palace. 6 straight defeats for Leicester, but focus on the positive, I suppose. And Palace, a club record in terms of top flight away games, unbeaten. 6 of them after the 2-0 win at the King Power. How impressive have Palace been in recent weeks?
Well, they've come back into form. I think the goals tonight were Mateta and Guehi again coming back into form. A lot of speculation about his future in terms of will Chelsea go back in for him, and yet he's such a professional. He's just sort of focused again and doing well. So absolutely, I mean, they've got a good coach in Glasner. I mean, again, with our sort of managerial merry-go-round, about a month ago, people might have been questioning him, and yet look what he's done. He's got them rolling again. But yeah, Leicester in a lot of problems.
They are certainly in a lot of problems. 6 straight defeats in the relegation zone. Carl, are they going to roll the dice again, or are they with Ruud till the bitter end. What's your read on that situation?
Oh, managerial merry-go-round. We're already talking about Ruud van Nistelrooy's future.
I don't know. It's happened before, hasn't it?
It has happened before, but that very rarely works in terms of keeping a team up, in my anecdotal experience. I do believe, Leicester are down bad, to use the modern parlance. Ruud van Nistelrooy has been a successful coach in his nearly full season when he was at PSV Eindhoven. I believe he left with one final game to go in the league there. And of course, his 4 games as interim manager at Manchester United this season had some success. He is a curious manager, and the sample size isn't quite large enough for us to make huge conclusions as to his approach as it is right yet. Leicester's out of possession approach right now may need some work, but also you're talking about a squad that, when they did come up, there are questions over their sustainability in the Premier League. Losing a player like Dewsbury Hall to Chelsea in the summer, I think, probably took 1 or 2 notches off their potential ladder. So it's difficult. However, I don't like betting against Jamie Vardy, so I will remain faithful that this club can do something.
That's a good point as well. I think Vardy missed a couple of chances, but he's been such a legend for such a long time, hasn't he? Let's talk Times in another financial story. We've been very much inundated with those in recent years, Henry, haven't we? Martin Ziegler, who's been leading the way with this story. Chelsea in talks to avoid points penalty. Club want to settle secret payments case with cash. To give a bit of context, people, Chelsea's present owners self-reported the matter to UEFA and the Premier League after it came to light during due diligence when they bought the club in 2023. Chelsea reached an agreement with UEFA in July of 2023 to pay an £8 million penalty as a sanction. I suppose the point with that context, Henry, is as well, fans of other clubs may be bristling of suffered points deductions. This feels like a pretty unique case, doesn't it?
Well, it's a unique case in that it's different from PSR because this is secret payments rather than a sort of sustainability issue. I think fans of Everton and Nottingham Forest, who had points deductions in recent seasons, will look at this and go, well, hang on a sec, where's the justice in that? So I don't think this is a case, whichever way it's settled, it will be sort of greeted with unanimous applause. I mean, you have to credit Chelsea for what the new owners did. Clearlake, Todd Bowley came in, as you say, they self-reported. The fact that they were fined by UEFA rather than had any sort of particular sanction thrown at them, but then the Premier League, their famous rule book, which we've all sort of have as our bedside reading, is, does actually allow for points sanctions on this. So it's going to be an interesting one. But if the Premier League do opt for a fine, absolutely, you can guarantee everyone, many of the fans, certainly outside the top 5 or 6, will say one rule for the elite, another rule, i.e. points deductions for the rest of us.
Yeah, the Telegraph reporting Chelsea to escape points deduction over historic payments made under Roman Abramovich. Carl, what do you think? Is it sort of a caught between following the precedent of UEFA and sanctioning with a fine? £8 million would be, I think, greatly received by Chelsea, wouldn't it, at this point, versus points deductions? Or do you think, as Henry suggests there, they should take it upon themselves to be consistent with some of their disciplinary measures?
This is a big question and one that will run and run. I think the Premier League is in an interesting state where obviously there is talk of a regulator coming in, and the Premier League wants to show any possible independent regulator that they can regulate itself. However, as Henry said, if you are a fan of a non-top 6 club, it does look very much as if it's one rule for the moneyed and one rule for the less and economically gifted. The story is, any sort of crime that's punishable by a fine doesn't really count as a crime for the more money there. So it's very difficult, very, very difficult case for the Premier League and UEFA. And of course for Chelsea, I believe, some merit in self-reporting themselves, but also some questions need to be asked as to what the previous ownership were doing.
Absolutely, yep. A lot of questions hopefully will be answered as well. Premier League, of course, not always been the most unified place of late. We'll see if that adds to those tensions. Let's talk about Chelsea, Henry, recalling Trevoh Chalobah from Crystal Palace. The curious case of Trevoh Chalobah. How peculiar is this? Because this was a man in the wilderness at Chelsea, wasn't he, before his loan move to Palace?
A man in the wilderness who's a good defender, versatile player, who knows the club has always played well for them when he's been given the opportunity. And I think he was disgracefully treated by Chelsea Football Club. And I think that he went to Palace. He did pretty well there. And I think if you saw his Instagram message and of appreciation towards Crystal Palace, actually gives you a window on what sort of character Trevoh Chalobah is. He's a good guy. He's a good player. Badly treated by Chelsea, who've had to swallow their pride, bring him back in because of the unfortunate injury, another unfortunate injury to Wesley Fofana. So, look, whether this then becomes another part of the sort of bargaining process to try and get Mark Guéhi back next summer and Chalobah goes back the other way. But look, we have to remember that footballers who, we often sort of depict them as robots, well paid, but they're human beings. And Trevoh Chalobah has not been treated properly by Chelsea. So look, I hope they look after him on his return.
Absolutely, yeah. We hope he does. He is treated well. What does it say about him, though, Carl, that he is walking back into a situation that presumably was very difficult for him a few months ago? An attitude, seemingly, that's very positive.
Oh yes, by all accounts, Trevoh Chalobah is a fantastic professional. To play for Chelsea was his ambition and life goal, and he achieved that. And due to the turnover and instability of Chelsea, that perhaps was taken away from him, and he's done very well, I believe, at Crystal Palace. You also bear into account that his shirt number was taken away and given to João Felix as well. So he's going to be re-entering a very interesting circumstance at Chelsea. But also, I believe he'll probably do well in this 6-month loan spell, returning to Chelsea, because, well, he's a hard worker. He's not someone afraid of grafting, and that's the sort of player that Chelsea need right now. And
they did with Wesley Fofana injured, certainly, don't they, as well? Let's talk tennis, Carl. Stay with you. Jack Draper digs deep to silence boorish, boozy Australians in his victory over Thanasi Kokkinakis at the Australian Open. What do you make of this? Is this tennis sensitivity? Would a football fan see this as normal, or have they got a point here about boorish conduct?
I think this is half and half. It was a tremendous comeback victory for Draper, playing tennis for the better part of 4 hours across 5 sets. And yes, every now and again, especially in some of the bigger opens, you can see the home crowd gets behind their person and then starts throwing pelters at the so-called heelish foreign tennis player. So in this case, Draper. And Draper gave a little bit of bite back. If you're a tennis traditionalist, perhaps that's not the sort of thing you want. However, as someone that enjoys a little bit of needle in all of his sports, I quite enjoyed it.
Got about 10 seconds, Carl. He's got that resilience, hasn't he, as well? But I just wonder, can he go deep? We saw him go at the US Open. Do you think he's building that endurance? You mentioned the length of it.
Why not? He absolutely has the stamina for it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Just wish Jack Draper all the best, and all the British tennis players as well. Henry and Carl, been a pleasure to have you on Back Pages tonight. Hope to see you again very soon with the football coming thick and fast. Remember, as well, the show's back at hour, also available as a podcast. You just have to download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Join us again on Thursday night. More games, and our guests will be Jonathan Liu and John Cross.